Last time on Freetown's Killer Mountain. I travelled with doctors from the charity Physicians Across Continents to Freetown in Sierra Leone following devastating floods. Estimates numbering up to 1,000 people are believed to have been killed. We set up an emergency medical clinic at the site of the disaster to help those affected. Whilst undertaking an emotional journey, hearing the stories of those who almost lost their lives. In the second part of the documentary, we meet the soldiers who've been recovering bodies from the rubble. Whilst more serious cases are seen by the team, I speak to the Deputy Health Minister helping to oversee the crisis. And Physicians Across Continents and I meet someone who was part of Sierra Leone's health infrastructure before the country's civil war. The flooding disaster brings back haunting memories for Sierra Leone, as far as burying the dead goes. During the Ebola epidemic, doing this was dirty and dangerous work. But the crisis showed the high tenacity of the people of Sierra Leone. Right across the country, teams of impromptu undertakers sought out highly contagious bodies of Ebola victims and buried them.
We don't want to leave dead body exposed because of the thing to be with that dead body exposed here, someone might catch.
We use personal protective equipment, and then we use gloves, and then we use boots, chlorine. It's very risky, that's one, and then it's a voluntary job to save our country.
In the immediate aftermath of the recent mudslide and flooding disaster, one of the main government hospitals, Connaught Hospital, in the western part of Freetown, saw more than 200 bodies brought to the mortuary. The coroner says it was overwhelmed by the increasing numbers of dead bodies.
How the body then they we will identify. So there is no need for looking point for body where able know the person. So when you say like how the president don't talk yesterday, Kaya, let them bear. Now so God magnet died.
Reflecting the staggering scenes outside of the hospital, hundreds of individuals and families queued to identify and look for their loved ones.
I'm here to find the dead corpse of my sisters.
In addition to the need for greater infrastructural development, the overriding challenge facing the government in the aftermath of this crisis has been the health challenges posed. With the disastrous effects of climate change seen not only in Africa but across the world, the task to ensure health systems are up to standards to tackle any crisis that can affect the health of the population is significant. I am here in central Freetown to speak with Deputy Health Minister Medina Rahman to find out more about what the government has been doing to address this.
We responded very, very fast. It's the fastest response we've had. This is the worst disaster, and I believe we learned a lot from the Ebola that prompted our swift response to this disaster. And again, being that the warning has been going out for people to stop building and living in disaster-prone areas, but we have to have strict measures now and enforcement in making sure that that actually is adhered to. Because at the end of the day, this is what happens. Because if we remove them and flatten all the areas, the disaster areas, and then government will be able to now enforce that nobody builds and live in those areas.
Physicians across continents has been operating in regions near Sugarloaf Mountain, where the mudslides and flooding took place. So far, we have seen a number of people who require both physical and psychological help and counselling. Last time, I spoke to Adama Munu, who gave an account of how she and her 3 children escaped from the floods. Unfortunately, this is not a unique story. In fact, so many of the mothers and fathers that I've spoken to have lost many children, some losing 1 or 2, 4, 5 or even 6 children. Imama Matsure is one of those mothers who has suffered this loss. She has 1 surviving child, whilst 4 of her other children died during the mountain disaster.
Nadem picking you up to?
Nada up to Idrissa, Zainab, Aja, Mohammed, Nada up to Gordon Kille. No, let's go. Who's the girl is the big table with me?
With so much loss, the recovery of bodies from the area has been tasking for those working in the police force and even those recruits taken from the country's army. Many of those who died have already been buried near an area called Waterloo. These are the soldiers who have the harrowing task of recovering the bodies. I am told that they form a regiment who have been working tirelessly at the site 2 weeks since the incident took place. Because of this, some of them have become incredibly ill. They have come to the clinic to be checked.
Of course, they are here this morning to take treatment from the medical team of the physicians across the continent. While the place is very cold and headache, they have fever, and it goes up to malaria. The place, there's no tent, they are day and night. Of course, there's nothing to secure them.
Just as I finished the interview with Ibrahim, we are approached by a young woman who we later learn is called Fatou Sise. Clearly distressed and complaining of extreme pain in her head, eyes and sides, we take her as quickly as we can to the clinic.
This is one of the emergency cases that we have seen today. She's coming with severe headache, burning in her eyes, unable to sleep, unable to eat for the last few days. And clinically, there is nothing wrong with her, but she seems very sick. She's having abdominal pain, loin pain. We cannot even speak to her because of this pain and burning in her eyes. We cannot rule out, of course, all the diseases that we need to check on her. As you can see, we have a very limited resources here. We give her a painkiller just to relax her, and we ask for an eye drops. But unfortunately, because Sunday today, even the ophthalmologist is not available in the hospital. Maybe after the pain is relieved, we can speak to her and we can know what is the problem. Is this her usual way of having the headache, or this is the first time, it will make a difference. But at the end, we need to investigate here more, like going to the ophthalmology doctor and measure the intraocular pressure to rule out any glaucoma or any high pressure in the eye. And this needs to be managed by specifically the ophthalmologist. But we will just manage the critical situation now that she's suffering.
I put to Mrs. Rahman the question as to whether government hospitals were able to reduce any pressures relating to the aftermath of the disaster.
I wouldn't say that. It's that a lot of people would flout to Connaught Hospital in times of disaster. But Emergency Hospital also took patients. The 34 military hospital also had patients that went in. The Lumley Hospital also had. We had all these 4 hospitals were able to take people as they were coming in from that disaster. So it wasn't like anywhere else. When there's a disaster, of course, there's going to be overflow until we get things under control.
I'll check it later.
So we're on our way back to the clinic to see some more patients and whether or not anyone requires any more assistance. And then the plan is to go to the old school club where there is 5-bed units being set up for those who've been referred to. So we're looking forward to seeing that completed and hopefully we should see the doctors in action. It's our last day here at Regents, and long lines are forming outside an emergency response centre. The government is requiring people affected by the disaster to be verified and register their details to be transferred to more suitable temporary accommodation. Upon arrival, we catch sight of Adama Munu, who we spoke to a few days before. Victims and survivors in this disaster have lost everything. And whilst access to health is important, they do not have enough money to buy food. Instead, they are having to rely on international aid, which is being overseen by local authorities and security forces, and is becoming difficult to manage. Okay, so just a couple of yards away from the main clinic area, we are just outside a building in which people are able to get supplies, whether that's nappies, whether that's clothing, and just a couple of minutes ago there seemed to be a bit of a delay, so we're not so sure if there is some issues logistically, so there's a lot of chaos at the moment.
You don't see that, you don't see what's in the back. We will try our best because they said they want to relocate this camp to another better place. If they do so, then it's going to be easier for us to be able to reach the people themselves directly. Because as you see, it is all helter-skelter here. Most times people are just fighting for their own betterment. You bring the food items, whatever you bring here, you put it on the side, take it back home. So the people don't get anything. So it's like the best way you can do distribution here is if you stand on the ground and do it yourself. Then you know the people you need to reach, you reach them personally.
I asked the team why they think coming to the emergency disaster area was important for them and how they feel about working at the clinic to support people here.
I want all doctors all over the world to join back because it is a very touching thing that one can ever do.
We've been here for a few hours now since the morning, and the number of patients entering into the clinic to get checked by our doctors are starting to come down to much smaller numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the old school club to see if they've finished setting up the specialist clinic, which will allow for further medical attention. Now, we don't necessarily expect it to be complete, but we are going to check out and see what progress has been made.
Bye-bye. See you later. Bye-bye. Thank you.
These are one of many campsites that are being set up by international agencies. There are no clear estimates given as to how many survivors and victims will be housed in these tents, but I'm told by organisers that people housed here will be staying for at least 3 months before being housed in more permanent accommodation elsewhere, in some parts of Freetown and outside of the city. So we're here at the camp, and it seems that a good number have been set up, around 7 or 8 from what I can see from here. And inside we have a number of different mattresses and other facilities for those who have been displaced. Now, according to official figures from the government, 10,000 people have been displaced. Where we were before at the other clinic, there was about 200 that were housed in the elementary school, and there are other camps in which people are taking temporary shelter. We see Adama Munu, who has been staying at Regents, who has been one of the lucky few to make it this far.
Okay, explain. Just how you explain.
Now it's better. Now I don't well, now better. The pain will be there for me better. This back now, you call cough now, you call no more now, but it don't better.
Does she know what's going to happen when she leaves here? Is she aware of what's happening?
Okay.
You never put the voice on the phone.
Okay, say that. I mean, she's
Alhamdulillah,
better for her when she's here now. You understand? Because you can't compare now to before how she was here. I mean, like her daughter here, she has cold, but she's better now. She too she's feeling fine.
Better now.
Okay, bye. Come here, not anything. Mom back to you, come here now. Okay. It's like
I don't know
they are here, their house here. So she didn't even know what would be the next step. You understand? She's looking to government. Okay, she's looking to government.
What's the government to do for?
To government? What? Okay.
What's the government will do? No, it's suicide government to get for people.
She didn't know exactly the direction that they will be taking to, or we are government to carry out. You understand? So she is looking at government, what government will do for her.
It is wonderful to see some of the people that we've met at Regents come to a camp like this and find some sort of stability. Whilst it will take some time for them to move into much more suitable accommodation, these camps are definitely some type of solace for them, given the situation at hand. Nearby, the government has acquired a property once belonging to former international footballer Michael Cologne. It used to be a nightclub and has been renovated to supply medical assistance for those staying here. So now we've moved on to the main clinic area where patients are going to have further medical attention. As you saw beforehand, we have the nurses on the ready, many of whom we saw in the other clinic at Freetown. So we're just going to speak to Dr. Contact, who is in charge of the operations here, to see exactly how the victims and the survivors of the tragedy are going to receive further medical support and what's in store for them.
After the incident, the mudslide incident on the 15th of August, temporarily people were located at one very tiny school. And in that school, of course, as long as people are together, the Ministry of Health needs to respond to their health needs. So we were able to establish a tent and we start seeing patients. But of course, we looked at the situation and we found out that that was not ideal for people to live. So with the support of the political lead, the president himself, and the rest of the cabinet and the military and all the other institutions, we were able to identify this old school campus as a perfect spot for relocation. The building was vandalized, no toilet system, the roof was leaking terribly, the whole floor, the tiles were all root up and it was really in bad shape. And we had the army engineers to come in to start working on the clinic, and they've been working on it for the past 1 week, I would say. But we have been able to start the clinic today, and at the start of this clinic we have established a clinic where we have 3 doctors that will see patients, And then we also have nursing station, a small mini lab, and a dispensing area for the patients. And we also have mental health sections so that they can respond to their psychosocial needs. So that is exactly what we have done. And the difficulties, as I say, the place was not well kept. So because of that, we had a lot of difficulty building this place. Even up till now, the roof is still, we are fighting with the roof. The roof is still leaking.
Before we leave, I decide to visit my grandfather, Harry Williams, whom I have not seen in 12 years. It will certainly make for a nice surprise.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Are you still jogging? You still running?
Yes.
There you go.
I did 1 mile this morning. Every morning 1 mile.
1 mile. Oh, watch us so big. You see, I know my body.
Very much. That's the younger sister.
Because my grandfather was the former health minister for the Sierra Leone government in the mid-70s, I wanted to know his thoughts on how the healthcare system can be developed in the country.
It depends upon how you keep yourself, how you eat, what you eat, how you care for your food, your drinking water, and so on. But war worsened it. But for now, we thank God it's getting better and better.
Actually, it is our pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
We'd like to know how to improve health section here in Sierra Leone.
Teach our children, teach even elders. Sometimes they'll bring food like this, uncovered, they leave it, flies come and infest, and you get infested. The food is there, somebody will come, say, I want a karama, say, penny, say, all right, I buy. And then from there, and it was not covered. It's just open and then straight to it. You see, all of that need some more education. And these schools, colleges, the teaching should do more to, help what you people are doing.
Speaking to my granddad, I come to understand how devastating war, corruption, and a lack of national unity can devastate countries like Sierra Leone, which was once stable. One thing from our conversation I get, it will take a long time before Sierra Leone's health systems can return to normality. My time in Freetown here is coming to an end, and I can't help feeling the same as the doctors. With a fragile health system and high numbers of extreme weather fronts brought on by climate change across Africa, I fear this may not be the last that we'll hear of a mountain disaster in Sierra Leone. It has been a humbling experience, meeting those who are holding on to hope in the face of great loss and tragedy, and seeing the relief that has been provided both by government and international agency. But the task that lies ahead for the country as a whole is no small feat.
The languages and the places change, and the sky has different stars. I may be walking in the streets of a city called London, but the dust on my boots and the rhythm of my feet and my heartbeat say Africa. I may be walking in the streets of a city called Amsterdam, but the dust on my boots and the rhythm of my feet and my heartbeat say Africa.